it's Lauren from Wearing History. Today we are going to have a tutorial for the 1910s Canteen uniform of the National League of Women's Service, or a sack apron for civilian use. So this is the pattern we're going to be working from. This is the mock-up. I'm working on the final version in this video, so we'll have a pretty fabric version for you to see later. But for this one, we're going to talk about the back opening. Really quickly, I want to give you a once-over of this pattern. This is an advanced difficulty pattern. It does come with photo instructions. However, it is quite complex for the modern mindset because it uses 1910s sewing techniques. So while you may think, oh, it looks really easy, it is in essence. However, it uses period techniques that are somewhat forgotten. So because of this, I'm going to rate this as an advanced difficulty pattern. For this pattern, there's a front and a back piece, which are both cut on the fold. And then we have this great collar. There's a belt, which is tacked to one side. There's pockets in the front. And if you want to do the civilian version for housework or whatever, here is the short sleeve with the little winged cuff that you tack up. And then for the uniform version, or let's say that you need something a little warmer for your housework, there's the long sleeve version with the two-piece cuff. There's a straight cuff and a winged cuff attached to there. Now really quickly, I'm going to talk about this collar because you may say, oh, it opens up the back, but why is the collar cut in one piece? That is because in the 1910s, this was a very common thing. They wanted things to fasten in very creative ways. So because of this, the collar actually snaps into one side of the neckline. So you see how that's unsnapping? And then you would unbutton it here, and that's how you would get into it. And then you could button it back up and snap it back up, and then that's how it closes. So this is finished in a bias. You have all the instructions in your photo instruction packet on ways that I suggest closing this. But that's not important for this tutorial. What's important is this back closure. So down the back, it's slit until a mark on our pattern piece, and then below that, it's all cut on the fold, so there's no seam below the back opening. We're going to talk about how you make that. It took me a while to research this and look in original period instructions to find this. I ended up finding it at a really obscure source for the 1920s, and I believe it was talking about underclothes. This was still used as a fastening for children's clothes, actually. I have some dresses for my little girl from the 1930s and 40s that used this technique, and I think this might actually be in one of my patterns for little girls on my website. However, it seemed more complicated in this version for some reason, so that's why I'm going to do the video on it. Now, little history on the pattern before we dive in. This is from 1919. It's the canteen uniform for the National League of Women's Service. The National League of Women's Service was a World War I organization that was for civilian women who wanted to volunteer for efforts having to do with the war. And there were lots of different divisions, and this specific division is the canteen. So the canteen workers would help serve food to all the guys in uniform. So that was why it was one of the more they had a lot of volunteers because a lot of women didn't get to talk to the guys one-on-one, and if they were in the canteen, then they could. My cat, he always wants to make an appearance in my videos. I don't know what that is. So yeah, this is 1919. It actually was an organization that started earlier, and because you may say, oh, well, war was over in 1918. Well, yes, peace was called in 1918. However, a lot of guys were still returning from overseas, and there were still a lot of things that needed to be done as the war was over. So this pattern, even though it dates from 1919, is suitable for anything that you want to portray for the National League of Women's Service canteen uniform from whenever it was started until the end. World War I started in 1914, but America wasn't involved until later on. However, this is such a simple, timeless 1910s look that you might be able to even adapt this for other uniforms. I don't know specifically, you'll have to do your research, but it might be a good base for you to start with if you have other impressions, like maybe you read Cross Canteen. It was a similar type of thing. You might be able to adapt it for your use. This one specifically says on the sewing pattern, it's for the canteen uniform of the National League of Women's Service. So it was for that. This is the original source material. It's a butterick pattern from 1919. So this is what the original looks like. In your photo instructions, you have stuff like that. Now, what you're going to need for the back opening, you're going to need a good pair of scissors. You're going to need chalk or some sort of marking. You're going to want to test it on a scrap before you commit to it to make sure it comes out in the wash. You will need a ruler of some sort. I like the clear rulers. And your pins, sewing machine, pattern, fabric. That's it, I think. No. You need a little bit of tool tape or something to reinforce the bottom of the slip opening. So since I'm doing the uniform version, this is in a blue chambray. This is what chambray looks like. So yeah, you want blue chambray if you're using the original. I found period sources that say that's what you used, blue chambray. And you used white piqué for collars and cuffs. I have white piqué on my website. And let's see, the cap was linen, so you want to get some linen. But yeah, that's it. Let's get going. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to take your sewing pattern piece. Already moved. Telling you, my cat, he wants to be in everything. This isn't marked very dark because this is my sample. On yours, you'll see where to go down to. Maybe you can see this, it's really faint. You see the lines that go across? If you can't see them, check your pattern piece, but that's where you're going to clip into. So the first thing you want to do is clip down to that mark, and then you're going to clip in 3/8 of an inch. So it should be like a T with 3/8 of an inch going in on each side. I'm going to do that and show you. And then after that, you're going to press under the 3/8 of an inch. You might find it easier now to mark your pattern piece after you do your slit. So I'm going to show you what that looks like on my finished one right after this. Here's a visual for you of what's going on the back. I've marked mine. So I've slid it down the center back all the way until the mark. And then I've clipped in 3/8 of an inch on either side. I have also marked 3/8 of an inch the entire length of both sides of the slit. So I usually will do this with a clear ruler and my chalk. And then these are really great. I think these are in the quilting section. But like I said, test it on your fabric and make sure it will come out in the wash before you commit to it. So you can see the line here. Now, this side extends underneath. This side folds on top, like this. So for this side, I want you to mark 3/8 of an inch and then 3/8 of an inch again, because that's what the hem is going to be on this. For this one, I want you to mark 3/8 of an inch and then 1 inch. Because what we're going to do now is we are going to turn this to the wrong side, and we are going to use those chalk lines as a guide for turning under the seam allowance here. So I want you to press this under, and then we'll come back and do the next part. Alright, this is pressed under 3/8 of an inch on either side. Now, you're going to fold it back again, and you can see that this has the line. I don't know if you can see, this is the 1 inch line. So fold it to 1 inch and then give it a pin. And then I want you to press that edge. If you prefer to press it before you pin, you can do that. So this side will be under 1 inch. Now this side is a different width. This side, we're going to turn it under another 3/8 of an inch. Seam allowance on this entire pattern, except for the side seams and the shoulders, are 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so you see how that is? It should not be the same amount on each side. They should be different, just like this. Now, it's worth pointing out that there's a little bit of a bubble happening here. This is good. You'd want this here, because that makes a really cool little pleat at the back after that it's all set up. So pin this and press this. And then after that, I want you to stitch really close to the fold all the way up here by machine and all the way up there by machine. Okay? When you get to the bottom, just get in there the best that you can. You don't have to stress too much about it. Just try not to get any weird puckers, okay? So you can stop your stitching right at the where it folds in. I'll show you this up close after I'm done stitching, so you have a better idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm done stitching. my edges. So you can see I got really close to the edge when I stitched. Do that on both sides. Now at the bottom here, I said you could stop before the cut. I actually decided while I was stitching it like this that going just a little bit down might be beneficial. So when you do that, just make sure it's really nice and flat and you don't get any weird wrinkles in there. So let me show you this right side out, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do next. So you want to have a nice table or some sort of space that you can lay this out on. You want to make sure that the tops are laying nice and smoothly, and so are the sides. Let me zoom into the bottom here, if I can figure out how to do it. Aha, there we go. Ooh, I didn't get a clip there. You can see how this is naturally just wanting to fold under. I didn't even do anything, it just wants to do that. That's what we want. Let me find my scissors. I'm going to clip that little thread. Okay. But when this is open, you can see how my stitching, I just decided to continue that line. You might want to do that too, because that might actually be beneficial for you to keep that from fraying. Alright, so now we're going to make our lap. You're going to turn this one in, just like that. Then you're going to lap this one right on top like that. You see how it just naturally wants to do that? Exactly what you want. Okay. So lap that and then give it a pin. Now, it's going to be important for me to mention here that your center back is going to be different from one side to the other. If you look up here at the top, this is the neck, okay? Focus. When this flaps, let me zoom out a little bit. You see how the center back is really right about here? It's not in the center of this. Like when you do a placket today, usually the buttons are centered. It's not going to be centered here. They're going to be right over that lap, so that the buttons have somewhere to affix to. It's just the way that this pattern was designed. So back down here to the bottom, you pin it like that. Let's do that one more time a little bit farther away so you can see. These flaps are loose after you've hemmed them. You're going to lap that one. You're going to lap that one. And then you're going to pin it across. Now what I want you to do now is I want you to stitch a box here. By a box I mean an angle down, like a little rectangle. If you're worried about getting your lines straight, I'm going to suggest that you use your clear ruler again and you draw your lines in at a right angle. The point here is to catch all of these layers together, including the underneath part. You don't want the underneath part where the raw edge is to flail loose in there. You want to catch it. You see how my pins are catching it? You want to catch it like that. Do your little square. And then we're going to finish that edge in the next video. I keep saying square, I mean rectangle. So, what you may want to do is remove those guys. Get this to lay nicely. I'm using the edge. Do you see I'm using the edge, the straight edge? I want you to do a right angle in there. So let's see, if we use this to mark the pin, that's where the raw edge is. So we want in from the raw edge, maybe about a quarter inch maybe. Okay. And I want this to be maybe 3/8 of an inch wide. And then I want to catch it all together here. So I'm going to use, just freehand this. that's about what I want to sew, like that. Okay. So let's lap it again and pin it again, so make sure that it doesn't lay all weird. It may be helpful for you to pin this closed up at the top. Really just need to feel what your fabric wants to do and try to get it to behave. It's like the main trick of sewing. What will the fabric let me do and what can I force it to do? You're just making a little box, all right? So stitch that. Don't forget to backstitch, and then I'm going to come back and show you what that looks like after we're done and show you how to finish the edge. Okay, I'm all stitched. Let's zoom in a little bit more here. Oop, wrong way. There we go. Now if it's not like pristine and perfect, like I can see mine's kind of going, like that's okay. You know, the more you look at real workwear of this period, which this is kind of workwear, right? The more you look at it, the more you see there's all sorts of little quirks. Just like sewing today, nothing is perfect. So don't stress if it's not exactly the way you want. No one's going to be looking at the bottom of your plate, okay? The main objective is to finish this edge and create a placket. But I want to show you when you open it up, you see it's like two little pleats. There's like the big one, and then there's the little one. That's what you want. So if you're like, oh no, there's bunchy under there, it's supposed to have a little fold. You just want that little fold to lay nice and flush. All right, now the inside, I'm going to take a look there. I just barely caught the edge. That was unintentional. I expected to catch more of the edge than that, but that's okay. The thing we're going to do now is you're going to take a piece of something sturdy. I'm going to use twill tape. So this is a cotton twill tape that I have in my stash. And if you don't have cotton twill tape, you can use a little tiny scrap of your fabric. You just want to turn under all the edges. It won't be as sturdy as cotton twill tape, but I've definitely seen originals where they used other materials inside, like maybe the same matching fabric or maybe something that contrasts that they have. So I'm going to make this about that wide. You want to have enough here to turn under your edges. Okay. Yeah, and so the point here to finish the inside is to lap it over that. Grab your pin. Okay. Turn it under again. Try to get just a little bit outside of where your slit was. So like don't butt it up right. You see where it's fraying already? Because of our modern fabrics, that's going to continue to fray. They're not woven as tightly as they were in the period. You just want to cover that edge to prevent more fraying. If it's not perfectly straight, don't worry about it unless you want to. Do what makes you feel happy. It looks like my stitching was a little crooked and this is straight. Funny. Like I said, it's a workwear garment. Don't worry about it too much. Now that that's pinned, what you're going to do is you are going to get a needle and thread and you're going to hand stitch this around the edge, like whip stitch it. You could do this by machine. If you're going to be wearing this a lot and you're going to be doing a lot of work in this, you may want to do an additional machine sewing here just to make sure that it's nice and sturdy. But because I'm only going to be really using this not often, just for civilian events and for my sample, I'm going to do it by hand. That's the end of it. So on the right side, you can't even really see my stitching. It's just this. But if you reinforce with machine stitching, obviously you're going to see two boxes there. If it was centered and a larger patch, you could, in theory, just go over this again and have two rows of stitching as the same box. That takes a lot more planning than I usually end up doing, but that would be a really great option if you need serious reinforcement. Just make a bigger patch and go around it, or perhaps another line that's evenly spaced outside here that catches everything. All right, I'm going to show you my, my mock-up to show you the fastening at the center back, and that's it. Here we go. So here is the muslin mock-up of my pattern that I showed earlier. So the collar has been unsnapped, so you can see that. The width here is just slightly narrower because this was my first sample, so on yours it will be 1 inch wide. But you can see what I mean about the center back being a little bit off to the side. It needs to be centered over your underlap. Okay, so you just want to make sure that that's in the right place. Now I need to tell you about the buttons. There are no button markings on this pattern, and that is because there originally were no button markings on this pattern. I've left the original period source as it was. When you do your buttons, you want your top button to be close to your bias binding, but not so that it's so heavy and thick that you can't get through there. So I put mine just at the very bottom, towards halfway done. So see, it's like halfway on there and halfway off. Because if you make it a little higher, it's just way too bulky and your cut is going to be more prone to fraying. So make sure that your center dots match up on your pattern. And then you're going to space your buttons from the top to the bottom. I used 4 buttons because that's what's shown in the period original. And I noticed the period original didn't have a button all the way down here, so I've spaced it pretty far up and then up here. Because remember, you're going to be wearing regular civilian clothing under this. You don't need to worry too much about coverage. For button spacing, I have this really great tool, which is a button gauge or a pleat gauge. And this will automatically calculate the width for you when you stretch it out. So if you need to mark your placement, I really recommend you get one of these tools. Sometimes my placement is so wide that I can't rely on from one to the other. So I'll do every second one or every third one, and that's where I'll mark it. Because look on here, it's quite wide. It doesn't go that far. However, I can scooch this in and it matches right up. Okay. So when you do your buttons and buttonholes, do your buttonholes going up and down, not side to side, because it's a lot easier. A lot of women would be getting into this on their own, so you would be able to, you need to reach around your back and be able to fasten the buttons at the top. Like if it's wide enough for you to get it in over your head without undoing the rest, that's the easiest thing. So you can do that. However, some people may want to have it a little lower, or they have a bigger head size or big hairstyle they need to accommodate for. So just make sure that your buttons are spaced so that if you need to get into this on your own, that you can reach behind your back and get into it. I think that's the end of this tutorial. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this helps you. One last note, make sure you mark everything on your pattern before you start. The center back at the top will help guide you for your button placement. The lines for where to under will help you. Remember, this extension goes out that way. This folds underneath. It's a little bit weird, but then once you do it, it actually makes a lot of sense. So I hope this has really helped you visualize what to do with this pattern, and I hope to see you soon. For more information, you can follow me at Wearing History on Facebook, Wearing History on Instagram, wearinghistory.clothing is my website, and wearinghistoryblog.com is my blog. Thank you. Bye-bye.